Most diabetics never get better. They just get worse. Their A1Cs get worse, their fasting blood sugar rises, and their diabetic complications increase and worsen. This is such a common phenomenon that many of the experts call diabetes a chronic and progressive disease. But for some blessed individuals who've been diagnosed as diabetic, things do not get worse. They get better. In fact, they get so much better that their glucose levels do not even qualify as diabetic any longer. Today, we'll look at why it is that most diabetics get worse and worse, but some get better and better. Before I answer the question of why most diabetics get worse but some get better, I need to tell you a story about the rise and fall of the greatest retail giant in the 20th century in America, which went by the name of SEARS. Now, you may be wondering why I would be talking about retail on this channel and what that could possibly have to do with diabetes, but hang in there. I promise you that I'll put it all together after a little bit, and you'll see why the story of the SEARS company has everything to do with beating diabetes or getting beat by diabetes. Now, if you're under 20 years of age, SEARS probably means nothing to you, but if you're 50 or older and live in the United States, you probably have a lot of memories of SEARS. I sure do. SEARS was a huge department store, and they saturated America. SEARS was the store of my parents. If my dad ever needed a tool or my mom wanted a household appliance, SEARS was the place to go. During most of the 20th century, they didn't just edge out their competition, they annihilated it. SEARS was, in those days, well, kind of like Amazon is today. It was the go-to place to shop for almost anything or everything. In the early 1900s, SEARS was known as a catalog seller, a company that made it possible for small-town folks to order all kinds of reasonably priced merchandise without needing to go into the big city. They began by selling watches and jewelry, but soon they advanced to selling nearly everything. They had you covered, literally, from cradle to grave. They sold cradles, and they sold gravestones. They were so aggressive in their attempt to become our nation's #1 seller, they even sold houses. That's right, you could order a house from their catalog in parts and pieces, of course, and have it delivered to your lot where you and your buddies could put it together. And by the time you finished, if you did the work well, it looked and functioned just like, well, a house. In the mid-1920s, SEARS opened their first brick-and-mortar store, and it did so well they soon opened dozens more. When the shopping mall craze hit the U.S. in the 50s and 60s, SEARS was there. At the peak of their success, they had built around 4,000 successful department stores that saturated America. SEARS became the largest employer in the world. They weren't always the cheapest store around, but they had such a reputation, and they had such a huge inventory of products, people seemed to be irresistibly drawn to them. If you had need for any product, you would automatically go to SEARS and buy it, kind of like we are today with Amazon. I can even remember as a young teen going into our local SEARS and admiring their motorcycles and motor scooters, hoping that I might be able someday to buy one. That's right, the SEARS in my town actually sold SEARS motorcycles. But by the 1980s, SEARS was facing a challenge. Several new retailers had appeared on the scene to threaten their dominance. Three of the biggest threats were Target stores, Kmart stores, and, of course, Walmart. These new retailers featured lower prices and flashier and more colorful appearances than the conservative SEARS stores. Added to this, the newer generations of Americans did not have nearly the loyalty to traditions as their parents. Never mind if mom and dad love SEARS. If I can save $40 on a new lawnmower or $50 on a new stereo player by going to Walmart or Kmart, I'll go there. Slowly but surely, SEARS began to lose its domination over the retail market in America. Additionally, Sears paid little attention to the growing obsession Americans had with electronics. They had their electronics departments, of course, but their electronics departments were not nearly as large as the other stores, nor did you have many choices of brands like you could find at Walmart, Target, or Kmart. When the Internet overtook America, Sears was slow to respond. The company that had been so innovative and brilliant in their ability to use mail-order sales and catalogs in their beginning was absolutely hopeless in offering products online. If they'd acted early, Sears could have beat Amazon to the punch and offered its tremendous inventory of products online just the way Amazon does today. And if they had done this, we would not be shopping on Amazon today. We'd be buying our products on Sears-azon. But that never happened. The result was precisely what you might expect. Sears declined rapidly. Somehow the execs at Sears either didn't care or didn't know what to do about it, and did not respond to their alarming decline. By 1991, Sears had slipped behind Walmart and Kmart in sales. They still made a profit through about the year 2006, but after that, the company started bleeding money badly. They sold off many of their assets, including the Discover card, Kenmore appliances, and eventually even Craftsman tools. But it wasn't enough. From 2010 through 2020, Sears stores started closing by the hundreds. They went from around 4,000 stores at their peak to around 100 today, and soon they'll all probably be gone. Now, what does all this have to do with either beating diabetes or being beaten by diabetes? Well, okay, here's the answer. Why did Sears fail? Why are they almost non-existent today? They failed for one primary reason. The times changed, and Sears made no effort to change with the times. They kept their prices high when other sellers were selling at significantly lower prices. They kept their dull, stodgy look when people were being attracted to bright, colorful stores. They paid almost no attention to the booming electronics market, while other stores were happy to stock electronics of every kind. Sears' attitude seemed to be, what we're doing worked for us in the 1950s, it worked for us in the 1960s, and it worked for us in the 1970s. Why mess with success? If it was good enough for Grandpa, it's good enough for us today. But of course, they were completely wrong. By the 1980s and 90s, America had changed, and our nation had entered a new season with new attitudes and new shopping and purchasing habits. And by the 2000s, things were changing all the more. Now, there's a word for the need to change with new seasons of our lives, and that word is adaptation. Our world is never static. It is constantly changing and evolving, and if you're going to survive, you'll have to learn to adapt, and adapt again, and then adapt some more. Adapt or perish. Those are your choices. And Sears either could not or would not adapt. They tried to attract buyers in 1995 with stores that were not much different from the stores they had in 1965. So what does this have to do with beating diabetes? It has everything to do with it. God has given us strong bodies that are capable of withstanding all kinds of abuse for a lot of years. And most of us have been abusing our bodies since childhood. We abuse our bodies by ingesting loads of sugar and loads of carbohydrates, driving our glucose levels through the roof, only to have them come crashing down a few hours later. And then we eat again, another meal loaded with sugars and carbs, often downing it with a supersized soda. And once again, our glucose soars and then crashes precipitously in 3 or 4 hours. And we do this over and over again, day after day and year after year. And for the longest time, we seem to get away with it. And then at some point, usually while we're in our 40s or 50s, but sometimes younger, we start having alarming symptoms. Our eyesight starts failing. We find ourselves constantly thirsty and constantly needing to urinate. Some may even pass out. We go to the doctor and he or she tells us that we have diabetes, serious, severe diabetes. We're told that we'll have to take this medication or that medication, and probably we'll have to start injecting ourselves with insulin at some point. And we go home in shock, severely depressed and wondering how we ever got to this point. Sadly, most diabetics simply take their meds and take their insulin and make no dietary changes. They foolishly try to eat in their 50s the way they ate when they were in their 20s. They do not adapt to this new season of their lives, and like SEARS, they grow weaker and weaker. Here's the reality. As we get older, our bodies simply do not work the way they did when we were young. We don't see as well, we don't run as fast, we don't look as good, our minds are not as sharp, we strain our back much more easily, and we tend to put on weight. We have to adapt. We may have to wear glasses. We cannot lift heavy objects like we once could. We probably ought not to be playing tackle football with our neighborhood geezers. We have to do things differently. And if we stubbornly insist on living at that same lifestyle at 65, the one we had when we were 25, we are most foolish. Every season of our lives calls for adaptations, and this is especially true for us when insulin resistance, which we probably have had for over a decade, finally morphs into full-scale diabetes. And for the diabetic, the number one adaptation required to get better instead of getting worse is to change your diet. The diet you ate at 25 was probably trash anyway, but you seem to get by with it, but not now. Eating that way today would be not only wrong, not only inappropriate, not only unwise, but just plain stupid. I hear from diabetics every day in the comments that are written under my videos, and one of the saddest comments I read are from people who describe a parent or a friend or a brother or sister who has diabetes, and when they try to tell them that they're going to need to slash the carbohydrates in their diet, their diabetic relative or friend tells them, "No way. I would rather die than give up on my sweets or modify my bread or stop eating potatoes." Often these who share this story go on to tell how that person ended up having a leg amputated or going on dialysis or dying far too young. Like SEARS, they refused to adapt to their new normal and paid a terrible price. The primary adaptation you need is simply to cut the amount of carbs that you eat, and not by some small amount. In this new season that you're in, with a slower metabolism and probably fatty liver and fatty pancreas and a flabby body, you're going to need to bring those carbs way down. For most of us, that may mean going from around 250 to 300 grams of carbs per day to around 20 to 50 grams of carbs per day, about an 85 to 90% reduction. Those who refuse to adapt, who insist on eating exactly the way they did when they were young, will suffer terribly. Once again, the rule is simple. You adapt or you perish. I entered my new season when I was around 48 years old. It's clear now that I had serious insulin resistance and was headed for type 2 diabetes. It took me about 6 months to figure things out, and after that I did the sensible thing. I adapted. I've been eating a low-carb diet since 2002. Over the years, I've figured out all kinds of marvelous low-carb and keto foods and desserts that I can eat without raising my glucose or insulin levels much. And so far, by the grace of God, I'm healthy. I'm enjoying my life, and yes, I'm even enjoying my diet. I'm not suffering for cutting most of the carbs out of my diet. I stopped having frozen shoulders, irritable bowel syndrome, and crushing arthritis. Most importantly, I put an end to those terrible surges and crashes in my glucose levels. My dietary change was a small price to pay for these last 19 years of health and strength. You see, I don't want to be like SEARS, stubbornly trying to do things that worked for me in the past, but clearly do not work for me in the present. And I hope that's exactly what you'll decide for yourself. Adapt wisely to this new season of your life, and your body will thank you for it. Now, if you're feeling like you need more specifics as to what this new adapting diet looks like, I recommend you watch my video titled Two-Phase Plan for Crushing Diabetes, and also the video, If I Had Sky-High Blood Sugar, What Would I Do? I'll leave links for these two videos in the description below.